Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the BlackUSA.News morning show. My name is Donnie Glover. It's been a minute. Hope you had a wonderful and peaceful weekend. We had the very entertaining end of year event last Thursday down at Casey Jenkins' Darker Than Blue. Really nice affair. We had some heavyweights in the house, including Tony Draper from the Afro. Had a lot of Baltimore media in the house. Mike Randolph all the way down there in Tampa. We know you miss Santan. That's why you can't get enough of us. Um, Paris Brown from the Baltimore Times was there. Who else? Mark Clark, Conan, we had Janelle Butler, Erica Austin. Special thank you to Sakina Dean of Divine Light for being our sponsor. It was a really nice gathering. Casey's got a really nice restaurant. I did not get to taste the food. Let me just tell you the truth. I was busy putting the event on, but I do plan on going back and getting some of that real food uninterrupted, if you know what I mean. So we're winding down. I want you to know that beginning next Monday, the 20th, we will have a brand new morning host. It means that I can pass the ball. That'll be wonderful. We have a wonderful team of broadcasters 7 days a week. We just picked up Maccabee Griffin this Saturday. He started his first broadcast live from Indianapolis. We're really excited about that. That show will feature, among other things, authors. So if you haven't a book out there and you're trying to get it out there into the mainstream, make sure you check it out. That's 12 noon on Saturdays. This Saturday, we're going to have Super Saturday. And so we're going to feature during Tasmia's hour from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. We're going to have a number of entrepreneurs from around the country come on and give one last pitch before the big December 25th day. The whole goal is to promote our businesses, support our businesses. By the way, I don't plug this enough. My name is Donnie Glover. I'm also an author. I Am Black Wall Street. And that book goes into the story behind Tulsa. How did those people get all the way out there to Oklahoma? Where did they come from? What drove them there? And I mean, that's not hard to figure out. The Deep South, the brutality, the rapes, the murders, the lynchings, all of those things. Again, the book is I Am Black Wall Street. Came out in June. And two reasons the book came out is because this is the 10th year of our awards. And that coincided, fortuitously, if you will, with the 100th commemoration. We have with us today former Prince George's County Executive, Rushern Baker. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the broadcast. How are you?
Donnie, I'm doing good. How are you doing today? Good to be
Blessed
on
by
the
the best. So you got your purple on. You're not rubbing that loss in our face yesterday, are you?
No, 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 not at all, not at all.
Okay, so you've been cautioned, you've been warned. You know this. We throw some hard shots.
That
5% of this country. This country's 5% of the world's population, but we make up. We have 25% of the world's inmates.
Yeah,
and I think 40% of them look like you and me, black men. Here in the state of Maryland, I live in West Baltimore, where Freddie Gray encountered his untimely death. We have the #1 zip code, 21217, for sending people to Jessup House of Corrections, Production Institute for the Criminally Insane. and on and on and on. What can we do about that?
I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I served 8 years in the Maryland legislature, and 4 of those on appropriation, and this was in the 90s. And a lot of what we see now started happening in the 90s, when this so-called war on drugs, getting tough on crime, where we were taking folks who normally, if you got arrested in Howard County or Anne Arundel County at that time, you would probably get a warning if you were a juvenile. But in Prince George's County and Baltimore City, you were going to jail. And so, folks like myself at the time were pushing back on all of these things that were happening. But we were a small minority. And what we see now, and even, some of the stuff that was happening in Baltimore, and, I was mentored by Pete Rawlins, so I understand, the problems that were engaged in Baltimore City and in Prince George's County, quite honestly, at the time. But we were doing it the wrong way. If you talked about the things that I actually did as county executive, this holistic approach to crime, if I talked about that in the 90s, people would just shun me away. But you can't just have this attitude, and police will tell you this. You can't lock your way out of this. It's holistic. It's not just about, yes, you need good public safety. Yes, you need good prosecutors, but you also need prosecutors and you need good public safety that understand that, it's people are being treated differently in other parts of the state. And so what we decided to do in the county is, one, when we saw our homicides raising, when we saw folks going to jail, is how do we do it differently? We started looking at the things that were causing it. You can look at truancy rates, dropout rates in high school, children falling behind in reading in the 3rd and 6th grade, healthcare, which is a huge issue that you found, both mental and behavioral health, drug addiction, all of these things that could be treated by something other than simply locking folks up. And then once we do, and here's something around our juveniles and around our inmates, is we start working with returning citizens before they returned. Working with them working with juveniles who are in our jails, so we stopped them from going. So what people don't want to hear is that you can actually, put a dent in this problem. We did it. We saw our crime drop by 50% at the same time arrest drop. We had to refocus how police were interacting with people of color. Black and brown folks would get arrested. Other folks would be, get a slap on the wrist and, and sent home. So we had to just reorient it, the way we do things.
Can you tie in education a little more for me? Your county, my city, we're in a race for the bottom as opposed to a race for the top. Is it time for a Baltimore, Prince George's task force? And yes, if you were to become the first Black governor, I would need major attention to Baltimore and Prince George's County. Those are both majority Black, and we're consistently at the bottom.
Right. Well, first of all, I definitely agree with you. One of the reasons that I have made this statement is that I would move the governor's office to Baltimore City when we're not in session, is because you have to focus the attention on where issues are. And right now, everyone's talking about, what we can do to help the city. Our largest and most valuable asset that we have as a state is Baltimore City. So we have to focus attention. But you're absolutely right on education. But let me just tell you this, it's not just Baltimore City and Prince George's County. You look at our neighboring county, Montgomery County, which is now the most diverse public school population in the state. You look at Charles County, which is now becoming majority African-American in our public schools and probably already there. So what I say to the folks around the state, and I said this as a legislator, but I said it even more as county executive, I said to our friends in Baltimore City and our friends in Charles County and elsewhere, we're facing some of the same problems you're going to face. So why don't we start working on these solutions now as to what we're seeing? And that is, it's not just a matter of money, to the school system. It is a matter of things like health. Health is a huge part of what happens. Because one, if we know children are falling behind in the 3rd and 6th grade, which we've known for years, so you don't need a task force for that. We know it. You didn't need the Curran Commission. I could have told you everything you need to know without doing a commission. A commission in legislative term, and I've been a legislator, is what you do when you don't want to actually answer the tough questions about money, about time, about resources.
It's like a postponement.
It is definitely kicking it down the road. It's the best thing to do because it makes people think you're doing something when really you're not. You're just postponing it to the next person or next problem. We know for a fact right now that we know that kids who are falling behind in the 3rd and 6th grade are not going to graduate from high school. We know that. We know
they're going to the penitentiary.
Exactly. So if we know that, why don't we start working on it right now? COVID just exacerbated and made real for the world all the problems we already knew about kids who were behind already. So if we knew those children were behind already, COVID just made them even more behind. And so we have to start focusing on the issues now and do a holistic approach. That's money. Yes, you do need money in our school system, but you also need the other things that are not controlled by the school itself. The health department is not controlled by the public school system in Baltimore City or in Prince George's County or anywhere else. The health department is controlled by 2 people, and I know this for a fact because I was county executive. The health department is controlled by the county or the mayor and the governor. You need both in order to appoint a health officer or remove your health officer. So if that's the case, why aren't we working with the governor and the health officers from the counties to look at behavioral and mental health, which is something that I made abundantly clear when I picked the superintendent. I said, I want you focusing on behavior and mental health, family health, and, dental health, all of those things that were having impact on families. The other thing that I said is I want the same things we see in private schools. If they're doing a robust arts and creative and entertainment in private schools, why aren't we doing the same thing in public schools? All 3 of my children went to our performing and arts high school in Prince George's County, which is located in one of the most challenging neighborhoods in our county. But because you have this great program, parents were willing to send their children there. Well, if we know it works in these cases, why don't we do that throughout? The other thing is, transportation and economic development. All of those have an impact on what's going on in our schools and in our state. The thing, and the last thing I would say is the reason we know the schools are so important and public schools so important. We had the superintendent sit in on my cabinet meetings. I wanted him to hear about what was going on, not just in public safety. Everybody's like, yeah, schools need to know about crime and stuff, but they also need to know where we're focusing our energy on redevelopment, on transportation. If we decide to move a sidewalk and children now have to cross a busy highway to get to school, that's a decision the school didn't make. We made it, and we made it without them knowing there. We decided to build a new school in a certain area, and there's no other transportation other than the bus, so there's no public transportation, or parents now have to think of different ways. So what I wanted was this, or if we're going after technology, cybersecurity became a big thing. I want the schools there to say, our new high school at Fairmont Heights that we built, the only Black high school back in the day, is now cybersecurity, because we combine building a new high school with the jobs of the future, but we put it in a place that heretofore was just a high school. So all of those things have to come instead. And the governor can do these things because there's only 2 things in the Constitution you're required to do. One is pass the budget and education. You are absolutely correct.
You have a crowded field. Peter Francho, Wes Moore, John King, Tom Perez. I don't blame you for picking a running mate from Montgomery County. Numerically, you had to. Influence-wise, you had to make mention to Baltimore City, because Baltimore's a media hub. We're not just an important city, but in the state of Maryland, you have 11, 13, 2, Fox, the Baltimore Sun, Be More News, the Afro. Is it going to be enough just to say to Baltimore County, we're going to move the governor's office there? Do you have to do more to show you understand Baltimore?
No, yes, you have to do more. You just can't simply say you're going to move, the capital there when you're not in session, which I think is an important move, because you do need both things. You need to symbolically show the state that it's important, but also to be there in the midst of it. If you're in Baltimore City, in Baltimore County, in the Baltimore region, because you're right, it's the Baltimore region, you can't really talk about those problems if you're not experiencing them on a day-to-day basis. I said this to my former chief of staff. I said, can you imagine when we moved the county office, we didn't move the seat from Upper Marlboro, but we moved it to Largo, then people who were driving, part of my staff had to drive into the areas we wanted to redevelop. And they would make comments like, there's no place to eat here. I said, great. You know what? You're going to now work on that. All of there's no transportation. There's nothing here. That's why we're here. When you were sitting up there and it was nice and comfortable and everything was hunky-dory, you don't get to see it every day. It's a distant thing. So moving the capital there is important. But the other thing is, I learned from the last time, one of the biggest mistakes I made was coming into the Baltimore region and saying, listen, let me tell you about all the wonderful things I did as Prince George's County executive. And they were like, we don't care about that. We care about our lives. What do you know about here? How much time are you spending here? And so I didn't want to make that mistake this time. And that's why, I'm not just talking about moving the capital there, but I'm actually spending time in Baltimore City, in the Baltimore region. I'm taking, to heart the lessons that, the late Pete Rollins tried to teach me. And that is, you got to come here. You got to bring your family here to Baltimore City and to the Baltimore region, so you understand what we're going through. And you can't make decisions about a budget unless you do that. So we're going to spend a lot of time there. We're going to focus on the area and talk about some of the things that I think could help.
See, that's like me coming to Prince George's and telling you the story of Prince George's. By the way, I was down at Upper Marlboro, right across from the county building Saturday night. Had a chance. First, we went to see Mark Clark. He had a reinvention event at the Bowie Marriott. But I went to see an old friend, Chef Darnell Long. I know you know him.
I know him.
We went to Old Town Inn after leaving the Marriott. We wanted to get something to eat, and the guy was talking about going to BJ's. I'm like, no, we're 15 minutes away from Chef Darnell, and we've given a number of Black Wall Street events there. But Baltimore. So let me bring you up to speed. People haven't mentioned. You might be the last one to have mentioned the late Delegate Howard Pete Rollins, chair of House Appropriations Committee. Right. You have a generation who's never heard of him.
Right.
At best, they've heard of his daughter.
Right.
And considering she was in charge when the first riot went down in 47 years, and how closely people associate her with the mayor, two mayors before her, Martin O'Malley, I don't know if I'd be mentioning their names up here because the people they impacted aren't loud. That's not the loud crowd. I think in Baltimore, people are looking at the schools, but more than that, it's the crime. So I wanted to ask you this. This is one thing Baltimore knows very little about. In Prince George's, when you talk about the young people, young Black folks, a lot of Baltimoreans have never heard of dippers. But you've heard of dippers. I know about, when I went to school down in Atlanta, we'd link up with the DC Metro Club, and they would call it Love Boat. Yeah. My dad was a funeral director. And so I knew it even differently because I knew some street people would approach morticians in particular for the formaldehyde. Is PCP, the Love Boat, the Dippers, the Ooh-Wee, is that still a problem in Prince George's?
Yeah, it's still a problem in the Washington region, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it is devastating. When we talk about opioid addiction and how that blew up in the state and people paid attention to it, well, we had more folks dying from PCP and those things than any place, Black and brown people in this area. And so it became, not to say, I did a lot around opioids and want to do, but it became important when you saw Western Maryland and across the state, but we were still dying from the things that you're talking about, which is they're just as hard of a drug to get off of. And so our health department is where we spend a lot of time. But yes, it is still an issue. It's something that we have to pay attention to, and so we did that. We operated from a health perspective as opposed to, a crime perspective, because we were arresting people, and I've seen it firsthand in my car, somebody on PCP taking all their clothes off and running into my government vehicle. This is a devastating drug, but we send them to our.
If you've never seen that before or even heard of it, it could really freak you out.
It literally did. It was one of the few times as county executive, I was driving my wife actually, and it freaked me out because I didn't know. At first, I thought I hit a person, but he ran into my car, and then took all of his clothes off, and then ran back into it. And the police came, but it just freaked me out. I'd never ever seen it before.
So that's not criminal, even though he may have broken some laws. That's clearly a mental health or physical health issue.
Exactly. Sending him to our jails, is not going to help that individual or help us. It's simply not. It is having the bed capacity, having the ability health-wise to deal with these individuals and to get them into a productive state. Certainly you want to take them off the street because you don't want them hurting themselves or hurting anyone else. But you're not going to solve that problem by sending that person away, for a number of years and not doing anything while you have them there. And so it's a different approach that we have. So we did that. But let me say something. You talked about, the younger folks not knowing who, Delegate Rawlins. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But here's the reason I mentioned the name, and here's why it's so important. Just think about it. At a time, Baltimore City and the elected officials that came out of Baltimore City were training the next generation of legislators.
He was the boss.
He was the boss. He had nothing to do. He didn't have to impact me or the Speaker of the House, who was part of that committee. You can go down the way. What he understood was, in order for Baltimore City, which I love, to have an impact, I need to impact the next generation of leaders so they understand how important it is. When Ike Leggett and I came to Baltimore City after the riots, it wasn't because we had a great relationship with Stephanie Rawlins Blake, and we did, but it was because both of us had interacted with her dad as a leader and a powerful leader who understood how to use his position, that need to know how important this is and the impact it's going to have on your jurisdiction. That's the kind of influence that the city needs, and we need the city to have it. And so, yeah, I wish, there were examples of folks. I mean, Talmadge Branson, some others do it, but they were trained by Pete, the Speaker. If you look at these folks that are in there, they can relate that back to somebody who influenced them. Elijah did the same thing. One of the first people I met with when I came down to Annapolis when he was the Speaker pro tem. And so, in order for folks to really understand the issues in the Baltimore region, for those who don't live there, you need people to say, hey, you got to come here. And you got to spend more than just, a time in one particular area.
Well, I'm glad you said that. We'd love to invite you. We'd like to take you and see some places here in the city that are often overlooked. I think one of Mayor Stephanie Rawlins Blake's challenge was not knowing the streets. She was more of a, uptown girl, if you will. I think the difference between her and Sheila could walk the streets and people would know her. A wise photographer, J.D. Howard, he used to say, you can't teach what you don't know.
That's right.
You can't rule where you don't go. And so we love to show you where the television cameras don't go. And going back to your opioid, right now, it's the fentanyl. Here in 21217, one of the most economically challenged Black communities. Do you know who I have to chase out my alley every morning? White addicts.
Yes. Yes.
If I put the baseball bat on them, I'm going to jail. I have no recourse but to call the police.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel punked by a white boy who 5 years ago didn't even have the thought of coming here.
That's right.
Now I'm in a back and forth discussion. You talk about the guy jumped in your car. There's a white lady in my alley saying, excuse me, sir, but do you own this alley? And I said, actually, by golly, I do.
Yep.
Considering how much taxes they drop on us, but we also deal with a lot of vacants.
Yeah.
Are you ready to see Baltimore? I mean, it's the police ever since Freddie Gray, they've been missing in action. With all due respect, they have to go through so much to get a person off of a corner for loitering whereby most of them just say, hey, do you? As long as you don't kill anybody, sell all of the heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine that you want.
Yeah, you can't. First of all, when you were telling the story, if my wife was still here, she would laugh too. Is that when we first moved to DC and back right, and you remember with PCP with crack, we had this row house that we were renting, and the beauty of it is it had a parking space in the back. We were like, great. What they didn't tell us was that the crack addicts had taken over. And for the 3 years we lived there, we were like, y'all don't break into our house. And we were afraid. I would be honest with you. We were afraid to call the police. Not
damn right, because they know what's going on. The people selling the dope. The dope man run the streets.
Yes. And so, but it just, so that's a vivid memory in our life. But what you're talking about is absolutely correct. We can't have the police department and public safety give up. We know it's a tough job. We know there are challenges, and we know we have to approach this issue two ways. One, there's a way to police and not, over police, to be a public servant. We've gone through it. A dissent decree from the Justice Department. We had it at a time when I first took over. We were under a dissent decree from the Justice Department because of police brutality, which was real and has been real in Prince George's County for a long time. Yet, I had homicides that were approaching DC numbers. We were over, 120. And so people were at the same time saying, we want better policing, but we want crime to go down. And, I'd hear from police departments saying, hey, we can't do it. We feel like our hands are cuffed. I was like, that's BS. And we went at it. How do we actually train and get the right people out there? At the same time, you do your job, but at the same time, we're going to help you. We're going to not ask you to do more than you have to. We're not asking you to be the health officer. We're not asking you to be a social worker. We're not asking you to provide jobs for these individuals or transportation. That's what we're going to do. But you're going to do your job. When you see something, people need to feel safe where they want to invest or stay. And that's one of the things that has to happen. And there's a way to do it. There's a way, and we use the governor's office to help us. And this is what I've said to folks, is that we actually went to Governor O'Malley and said, he said, hey, your homicides are going up. We said, well, I'm glad you noticed. So, here's what we need. We need more training for our prosecutors. We need more sheriffs so we can get these outstanding warrants for violent crimes. We need money for transportation and employment. You help us with that. We can deal with our police department, and we're going to put more money into our health so that we can actually tackle some of these things without using the police department. but you've got to help. I mean, there's no way that any jurisdiction, not even Howard County or Montgomery County or wherever you think the wealthiest county in this state is, can solve any of these problems on their own. They need the assistance of the state because the state has more tools than we do at the local level.
Mr. County Exec, we left out something. We left out something that Martin O'Malley could never understand. In that whole formula you just gave, what's been neglected the most has been our recreation centers. I've been down there. Aisha Brave Boy took me to that one. I want to say District 25. All I know is I thought I was in a sports complex, a coliseum or something. And she said, no, this is a recreation center. Now, if you can give us one in East Baltimore, one in West Baltimore, you know, you would win big time favor in our books, because I don't know if you heard about it. 3 weeks ago, a 13-year-old young lady was shot to death outside of a recreation center. So O'Malley, when he was Governor O'Malley, let me be respectful, he talked about this 21st century schools thing. Okay, big money, new schools. Now, one would get the impression that these schools are going in the neighborhoods that need it the most.
Right.
One would presume that they're going to Black neighborhoods. I live in Sandtown. Before Freddie Gray, we had 2 of 3 elementary schools open. Now we have 1 of 3. The school right there where Freddie Gray, where the incident began, Gilmore, is now closed. When you close a school, you kill a community. And so every night on the news, murder in this East Baltimore neighborhood, murder in this West Baltimore neighborhood. But these are neighborhoods that have been neglected, and neglected by Black people, Black mayors, Black council people who, honestly, Prince George is considered the wealthiest Black jurisdiction in the country. 21217 is the complete opposite. And so what we find, and I in no way put this on you, we find a classism. We find Black people who have been to Nordstrom's once or twice, who know what Ruth Chris Steakhouse, what a good grain-fed steak tastes like, or good jumbo lump crab meat or crab meat cock. You are juxtaposing them from Pookie down the street. And I got to live next to Pookie, and I got to care about Pookie's kid, because if I don't help Pookie's kid now, before he gets to age 8, he going to be around the corner in another 8 years of 16 slinging. And so I guess the question is about classism, but also we say we're bringing resources to the Black community, but instead of them hitting the target, I don't know if it's our being bougie, being upper class, but the resources don't go to where they're needed.
No. And you know, Prince George's County was no different. You know, we are a fairly wealthy, we're a wealthy county, not even fairly, we're a wealthy county. You have African Americans that are, you know, incomes above the median average. But yet we have these pockets of poverty that you would see, especially along our borderline with the southern part of the District of Columbia. And for years, we were content to say, as long as a certain number of people were happy with the fact that you could keep crime out of their neighborhood, they could drive to their jobs, everything was fine, and you had resources going. Well, we changed that when we came in, and we changed it by a concept that I think could work, called Transforming Neighborhoods Initiative. Well, basically, we looked at 6 areas in the county where everything was going wrong, not just crime, but dropout rates were in the wrong direction from schools. There was no access to transportation, no access to jobs. You know, no developer or people wanted to move into these areas in the county. And so what I said was, you know, for years, I had been a legislator for 8 years. And we talk about these problems. We talk about the problems, say what we're going to do, but we never did anything. You know, we just kind of, as long as it didn't creep over to a certain number a certain zip code, then everybody was happy. So I said no. I said, in the midst of a recession, we're going to take all of the county's resources and money and time, and we're going to only focus on these 6 areas. So what that means in a county, and I'm sure Baltimore City is this way, is there were going to be 4 council members that were going to be completely happy. But 6 of the other ones, or 5 of the other ones were going to be mad, because what I said to them is, if someone wants to come in and develop a project in Prince George's County, they need the county help. If they're not in these 6 districts, only thing we're going to tell them is we will make sure your permitting is fine. But if you want county money, here's where you got to go. You got to go to Suitland. You got to go to Capitol Heights. You got to go to East Riverdale, not Riverdale. East Riverdale, where brown people live and, are marginally surviving. And at first, everybody hated it, including the neighborhoods that we were going into, Glass Manor and places like that. They were like, well, why are you bringing attention to us and our problems and telling the world? I said, because that's the only way we're going to get the resources. But it wasn't just about education, healthcare. I made every government agency we had in Prince George's County go to community meetings and to meet with them once a month and talk about the issues and try and solve them on real time. So if you don't do that, one is people will feel like, okay, I do enough. Just the resources never get to where it needs to get to. Because by the time you filter it from every jurisdiction, whether it's the city, whether it's the state, by the time you filter all that, those resources out, there's not enough money to make a real impact. Same thing with nonprofits. People said, hey, I got a great program. I said, great. Is it in one of these 6 areas? Because if it's not, I wish you luck. And if you need me to come speak, I'll be there. But I'm not putting county resources there because I need to help the problems here. You got a program for returning citizens? I know where they're going to return to. You want to do that? Great. And what happened when people found out we were serious about this, we started to see changes in it. But it took time. And it took being tough because people did not like it, especially elected officials. At the state level, it's going to be the same way. You're going to hear, well, why should we focus on these particular areas? Because it's not just Baltimore City where you have some huge problems. You go out to Western Maryland where you got 3 jurisdictions that want to go to West Virginia. Yeah, just think about that. Because they don't have access to jobs. West Virginia, which is, doing worse than any other place, they'd rather go there because there is opportunities. So we have to.
Do they really want to go there, or is that the rhetoric that's on the table right now? Because you don't want to go there. I don't want to go there.
No, and but the fact that people are willing to voice that out loud, just says they feel forgotten.
So let's go to that. So this takes me to J6. It makes me think. We not only have intra-racial racism or classism within our community, but we are still in a racial society. Obama thought it was post-racial, but those J6, how did you feel on January 6th when you saw people climbing, scaling the walls of the Capitol?
Oh, as somebody, my wife has spent, a good part of her career on Capitol Hill. To see, I thought I would never, ever see what I saw on January 6th, where people scaled the walls and were not arrested. Or can you imagine if that had been African Americans, black and brown people scared? They would have been shot immediately. To do that or to have a president inside, it was disgusting. And it said just what you said. It said that the tone of the country is heading in the wrong direction and led by people. But one of the reasons I think Maryland could be the beacon is, we could show the rest of the nation. I mean, we're the most diverse state on the East Coast, most diverse state. So what do we do with that? How do we make sure that people understand that we can get past some of these problems, all these problems, in a way that includes people without excluding them? This fear that, the fact that we're becoming blacker and browner is a problem. I face it, here, in the Washington region, my running mate Nancy Navarro is the only female Latina on the council in Montgomery County, one of the most liberal places there is. Only one female there. So she understands uniquely the problems that we face when we're talking about the browning and the blacking of America. But I think there are examples, that we can show the world. Just think symbolically and realistically, what it would look like to have the birthplace of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, where Perrin Mitchell talked about, inclusion in businesses, years ago, or Kurt Smoke talking about, the war on drugs and going in the wrong way. If we start leading the nation on these issues we know well, COVID just showed us, our problems, but we in this state have the ability to change that. And it's going to come from people of color. It is where it is.
If we're working, as you well know, on our first Black governor, it could be you.
It's going to be me.
Okay, it's going to be you. Now, we had our first Black president, and they're still beating him up because a bunch of us wanted him to have a Black person moment. I can't say what I really want to say, but they wanted him to just be real Black for 5 minutes, something. Are you going to face the same scrutiny as governor? Are people going to expect something different from you than they would a Peter Franchot, a Martin O'Malley?
Certainly.
Is it enough just to be brown skinned?
No. Well, first of all, certainly there's going to be a different scrutiny. Just look at the ticket. This is a Black and brown ticket. You got potentially the first Black governor and the first Latina as lieutenant governor. So we're talking about an all ticket of color. Is Maryland ready for that? And we get that question a lot, Nancy and I. My answer is yes, because if you look the difference, yes, they're going to hold us to a different standard. But the reason I like this ticket and the reason I'm running is the both of us have what every other, even when President Obama ran, people are like, well, he doesn't have the experience. He's never really run anything. That's not the case with this ticket. One, I've run the second largest jurisdiction in the state, almost 1 million people, a $4 billion government. And we did a great job in the 8 years there. Nancy Navarro comes from the school board and the largest jurisdiction. And she's been the president of the council in the largest, most diverse jurisdiction there is. So the experience part is what we bring. But we've also had to face the fact that we come from these majority districts of color. And we've been peppered with, so we're veterans right now of being peppered with, are you just focusing on Black people? Yes, because the majority of the people we have to help are Black, in Prince George's County. Where the problems are in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. But once we make those neighborhoods better, it benefits everybody. But you can't solve these problems if you don't. And so at the legislative level, which I've been there, they're going to talk about, well, what does this mean? When you talk about Black businesses, getting more contracts, what does that mean? It means you can't have, you've got a majority, you've got the most diverse state in the East Coast, but 11% of the contracts go to people of color. I mean, what kind
11%? I thought it was like 2%.
See, they normally get around if you about 11%, but just compare that. Let's say it's 11%. Compare that to what we did in the county with MGM, which came in was a statewide project. What we said to the state was, if you want to bring this, facility to Prince George's County, we want to control, and Mel Franklin, a council member, came up with the legislation. We want to control the minority business part of it. We don't want to use the state's numbers. We want to use what we come up with, and we're going to strike a deal with MGM, a community benefit agreement, because we don't trust that you're going to actually meet the numbers. We don't want them saying we can't find people. That's what they always say. They could never find us.
You had like a 20-round fight on that because
I did.
There were some say you didn't push high enough. There were some that you pushed higher than they expected, and you were never going to please everyone. If you had it to do all over again, would you do MGM any differently?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I think what we would have done, because look what we ended up. We ended up with, over, I think we calculated over 70% of the work going to businesses of color, Black businesses here, not just for the building phase, what everybody looked at, but also in leasing, in legal work, and I'll say the wrong word, those flowers that they put in there for those shows, those are being done. Cleaning contracts, ongoing work that we wanted, executive housing. We wanted it here. We didn't want them bringing folks in to lease those out. So I think we did it the right way. Here's what, I think the expectation was, like everybody, I think once you said it and you made sense to us, it made sense to us why we want to do this. If you're coming into, majority African-American county, that we should at least get some of the benefits, since you're going to take most of our tax dollars at the gaming table. I thought it would be easier. It would be a slam dunk. Come to find out, it was a fight at the legislative level, the likes of which, and a fight from MGM, quite honestly, until we finally had a meeting with, I had a meeting with the president of MGM and just said, hey, you know what? It don't have to come here. It don't have to come here. Here's what we want. This, you're not doing us a favor. You're going to make $1 out of this. And so it was a lot harder, but it showed me what can happen if you hold on to it and you force it the leadership that needs to happen. And that's the same way you have to do it at state. It is not going to be easy. People do not, Frederick Douglass was right. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did.
Never will.
Right.
How do we get a historically white male run state to shift to a Black governor? Man, I think back, we've had only white males as governor.
The first step is to get somebody other than a white male as governor, and to get somebody. This is one of the reasons that I decided to run. Because after spending time in Annapolis for 8 years and being county executive in a job that's just drains you, I felt like I had a pretty good public career. But the importance of this time, both what's going on in the nation, what's going on in the state, it's not just about, people are going to say the right things. Every candidate running for governor is going to say the right things about the issue you ask. And most will believe the right thing. But unless you can actually get it done, unless you know how to use the levers of power, and we talked about Pete Rollins earlier, the one thing he taught all of us is how to actually use the power of your office to get the things done that you want to get done. If you don't know how to do that, or you need training, you got to know for yourself. You can't have a chief of staff that knows. I can tell you as an executive, that doesn't work. And as somebody who trains other executives in my day job, you need to know it for yourself, because the issues come fast and hard. So you need to be able to know how to actually get a bill from the House to the Senate to your desk. But you also need to know the power of your office to work with local jurisdictions. I know what I can do working with the mayor of Baltimore and the council members, because I've actually had to go through it. I know the mistakes I made as county executive or as a legislator. But if you don't know those things and you need time to learn, or you're trying to look for the next thing down the road, then we'll be lost. This is a moment in time. But if you're a caretaker, or you're just looking for the next opportunity, we're going to get lost. And I don't want to do that.
One of our biggest challenges here in Baltimore, if you ask me, is the elected officials don't have a business mind. Being a council person, that's nice. Being a mayor, it's nice, but if you don't have business experience, if you've never made payroll, if you don't know what it is to put your house up in order to make sure your 10 employees, then you don't have an understanding of what business owners go through. And I'm not talking about you, but So if a business owner is trying to open a restaurant and you are befuddling him, you're just riddling him or her with all kinds of petty taxes. Baltimore's anti-business. We should be pro-business. We've got a port, we've got BWI, we've got the MARC trains. You would think downtown. I've been in New York 3 times since the pandemic. They're eating in the streets. They got it. They hustle, but every Baltimore's so. And I don't know. We ate over in Bowie, in Upper Marlboro, but Baltimore, the downtown is dead. It's like a ghost town, and these elected officials don't get it. Downtown's gotta pop.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, but you're absolutely right. But here, let me just add something to it. You know, I started my career working for a nonprofit in DC doing economic development on U Street and H Street. Of course, my adult children now think that's the greatest place in the world. If you're old enough to know DC, you know that was the drug haven and prostitution on those areas.
Wasn't no white ladies jogging through there.
No, exactly. But Marion Barry did something nobody else thought of. He took a government agency and he plotted and he put it right on U Street in the midst of prostitution, drugs, and everything else, and said, we're going to focus on getting this back. And here's where the Green Line is going to go. The metro system that was there, transportation. I say all that to say it's how I understood, that from a business perspective, when you start putting taxes and regulations, especially if you're running a small business, or a nonprofit, when we did development, if you made us wait one more second to get our permit, then we were done. We couldn't meet payroll. So I understood those lessons. I understood when I became county executive that what it was like to actually try and buy health insurance, at a reasonable rate for employees who could barely pay for it. How do you do a job training program? How do you actually recruit people? All of these things I actually had to do as a 28-year-old or 29-year-old lawyer with no experience running a business. So I remember what it was like to try and do that. But the thing that helped this county executive, not only remembering the business aspect, but knowing that when you're dealing with a government, it's not just a mindset of the business, it's knowing that the government operates differently, the legislative body that you talk about. Every person who's an executive, whether it's governor, county executive, or mayor, has to deal with a legislative body and has to know how to deal with that body to get the things you need and when to push, when to cajole, and when to do it. So if you're a mayor or a county executive, you not only have to do it with your county council members, you got to know Annapolis and how important it is and the legislators there. So I say all that to say when we started doing redevelopment, just like you said, first thing I did was I drove through DC first and saw their nightlife and drove through Prince George's County all the way to Virginia because I wanted to see the difference on how they were living, on a Thursday, Friday night and eating and places and what was going on in our county. And what I would see is ghost town when I got here on some of the busiest thoroughfares coming out of DC. It was popping. You get to the county, nothing, including National Harbor at the time.
What did you learn?
I learned that we have to make sure we're focusing on those areas and putting the resources in and going to businesses and saying, we want you to come here. We want you to make money because we want you to hire our people who will pay taxes and who will live here. And here's what we're willing to do. And so what we did was, and it wasn't popular at the time, is we took money from our rainy day fund, $50 million, and we said in the midst of a recession, we're going to bet on us. We're going to bet on Prince George's County. Like that. We're going to take the money, and if you're willing to come in here, we're not telling you that you, Mr. Businessman, you Whole Foods, you MGM, you Harris Teeter, we're not telling you to take a chance with your money because we know what your answer to us is. We were together, I tell you. What they told me to my face, but like, you know what? We're going to put our money in there. You, Mr. Small Businessman, if you're willing to hire the folks in this neighborhood, we're going to bet on us. We're going to pony up with you. And we did it. Was it popular? At the time, people were like, oh, no, you got to save that money. It's a rainy day. I was like, it's freaking raining. It's storming.
But business is the background. Your community is only as strong as your businesses. That's your backbone.
That's your backbone. And as I said to folks, I lean to the left. I told them when I came in, the business community was like, well, one, they didn't trust nobody from Prince George's County because the county executive was on the way to jail, and they just felt like everybody's corrupt. They're going to shake you down, all that stuff. So the first thing I had to do,
through the media. That's something unfortunate
it is unfortunate, but here's what I had to deal with. The reality is, saying the media did it to us, which is true. It was, a lot of stuff businesses were saying was not true. It was just perception. But I had to get past the perception at the business level and at the people level, which is why the first thing I did was pass an ethics law saying the county executive council could not receive money from developers. You want to do a project here in Prince George's County, you can't give us campaign contributions. It's either going to rise or fall on its merits. The people could see, hey, he's doing it just because they're giving him money. Nope, they can't give me money. I passed that law. I couldn't pass it at the local level. I had to go to Annapolis and pass it because the people here were like, council members like, why can't I get some of that money? I'm not a crook. I said, it doesn't matter. People think we're all the same. They think I'm a crook. And the way to prove it is that we don't want their money coming in here. I mean, given to us. So when I go to folks and say, I am doing this project, the one thing they can't say is you're doing it because this person gave you money. It's the same way we're running this campaign is why we're running it with public financing. Yes, I'm in a position now where I can just ask for money from developers, relationships I've developed over 8 years. But that puts us right back in the same boat where people say, oh, yeah, you're just saying that because you're spending time with, folks who can give you $6,000. Well, no, they can't. The most, and it has to be individual, the most they can give my running mate and I is $250. We have to get our money from people who are actually going to live under the policies that we promote. And so you have to do that. And if you show the business community, just think about this. We went from being last in job creations in the state, or next to last, to not only raising the minimum wage, which they said was insane. You couldn't do that and attract businesses, but to raising the minimum wage and leading the state, beating Montgomery County and other places around the state in job creation 5 years in a row, because we developed a relationship with the business community to say, hey, we just want quality projects here, and we want you to hire our folks. You do those two things, we're here.
We only have a couple of minutes. I want to thank you for taking time out. I did not acknowledge this earlier because I didn't want to give you a crutch, but I know you personally have gone through a family challenge, and I encourage you through the love of our God to hold on and know that your wife's legacy lives through what you do today. And on that note, let me just ask you the final question. Ehrlich, Michael Steele, that was 2002. Baltimore, Prince George's County made that happen. Hogan and Rutherford. What I'm getting to is we've had 2 Republican governors in the past 45 years, and prior to Ehrlich, there hadn't been a Republican in 36 years. The state is now purple. Hogan's rating is soaring like no one in the past, or at least in recent years.
Right.
How can you usurp that energy in a state that they did not support Muse, Kwesi, hell, even Ben Jealous? I mean, where was the Democratic Party? So this is what we know on the streets of Baltimore.
Right.
If they don't support a black person, yeah, we'll jump ship real quick.
Well, one,
party and that lady up there in Harford County, Marianne Lasante, shame on her. Shame on her for even thinking she's a public servant. Okay, I'd have got off enough. I tried to be calm for you on Monday morning.
Well, I appreciate it. I would say this. The reason I feel comfortable, not only with our chances of winning the primary, and you're right, winning the primary is one thing, winning the general is the other, is that, coming into the general election, the question is going to be about your ability to govern. what are your qualifications to do that? And I feel really confident that I can go toe to toe with anybody on what I've done leading the second largest jurisdiction and what my running mate has done leading the largest jurisdiction, and our ability to get across. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Can we do it? Yes. I think we can go to every part of this state and make a case why we should be in charge.
But Mr. Baker, how the hell did Ben Jealous get rhythm and we haven't seen him before nor after? That's the part of politics I don't understand. I've never seen. Okay, I saw him once or twice in Annapolis. Where is he? And then he gets the nomination, and we haven't seen him since. I don't get that part.
Yeah,
who said that's my leader? Who?
That I can't answer, but I can say this. I've been at this, and it is a difficult game. I mean, I've been at this,
it's a cruddy game, Mr. Baker. It's a very cruddy game. You can't trust anybody.
It is a very, very difficult game. I've gone from being a young person doing this, when I was 30 in my 30s to now I'm 63. So I've seen all of the challenges that there. But here's the thing. I also see the opportunities. I mean, this is a moment in time where we can actually get it done, but we have to do it right. That's why I keep emphasizing it's not enough to say the right things. I think Ben said the right things. He might believe the right things.
See, Baltimore was different. Baltimore was tough for him. You can't do commercials like you from the projects and nobody in the projects know you. See, that's not Baltimore. That's nowhere. He had no credibility.
That you can't do anything where you're not honest. I'll say this and then live at the top. I'm not from Prince George's County. My kids are, which is why they say PG when they want to. But the first thing I learned as somebody, I grew up in the military, so everywhere I'm a visitor. But the first thing I learned trying to run for office in Prince George's County was you need to be who you are. You need to be authentic. You are not Wayne Curry from where he lived in that part of Chevrolet. You're on the other side of the tracks in Chevrolet, the little town that both of us call home. And so what I learned was I have to just be who I am and not try to pretend like I'm someone else, because it's going to come back to bite you. People know when you're authentic. I am not from DC. I'm not from Baltimore City. I'm not from Prince George's County, but I chose this state and this county as my home, and I raised my children here. And that's the authentic part, that I fell in love with Maryland and Prince George's County when I was in law school and chose to live here. Same thing with coming up to Baltimore. I think last time you want to tell people, what you can do. And they're like, how do you know that without actually talking to me and walking in the neighborhood and meeting some people who are going to have to live here? As they said to me in Prince George's County, they're like, well, we're going to be living here when you go back to wherever it is you live. I said, yeah, it's a good point. It is a good point. If I don't really come back and understand, and how do we know you're going to show back up after you get in office? What I say to people, and they did it to me. I used to tell folks when I ran, for county executive, especially the third time, I said, well, in Suitland, an area that had challenges, I would say, hey, my kids go to school here. They were like, that's your kids. They come here for how many hours? And then they go back to wherever it is you live. I was mad at first when they said, but I thought about it. They're right. Why should we believe you're going to be any different than the last guy who spoke our language and didn't help us out? I said, you know what? I'm asking you to give me a chance, but to hold me accountable. I'm going to come back here and hold these meetings. And I did. And they yelled at me for 5 years until they actually saw something come out of the ground. I said, come. And they were like, we don't believe you. But when it came out of the ground, I said, every year I come back. I wouldn't tell them to stop yelling at me. I said, you should. It'll hold me accountable. I say the same thing across the state. You should treat everybody with a jaundiced eye, as my wife used to say. You know what? They've got that way. You stay on them. And I'm asking people to give me an opportunity to do this, but to hold me accountable.
I want to thank Marielle Stewart. If she's any example of who you have put in position, that I am thoroughly impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back tonight at 7 p.m. My name's Donnie Glover. Thank you, Mr. Rushern Baker, for governor of the state of Maryland. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Top of the morning.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.